It was back in the Great Depression, when Australia was luckless and sad, and the outback was full of bagmen who owned nothing but a swag. They had come out from the coast to find it, the dream of a job and a quid, just wanting a chance to work again. They didn't care what they did. They followed the Warrego Highway, and then they followed the rail, knowing that to turn and head back home would mean that their dream had failed. Past Quilpie they came in their searching to the dry, dusty land to the west, with naught but a proud heart to feed them, or a pillow of dust for their rest. One such was a swaggy that came there, known only as Daniel Mackay. Too weak from the searching and walking, he came into town just to die. Now not far from the town was a shanty, a ramshackle shanty of tin. With a door that swung loose on its hinges, it gave shelter from dust storms and wind. And over the years it had offered many a swaggy respite, somewhere to boil up his billy and lay down his swag for the night. That shanty old Dan found abandoned. The door swung and swayed in the breeze. He was too hot and too tired to go further. Outside it was 50 degrees. "Come on in," said the breeze to the swagman. "Come join us in the shade. Come on in." And the door of the shanty swung open, the ramshackle shanty of tin. In a dream, in a daze, he obeyed it, and found himself walk through the door. Inside he saw 3 gnarled old swagmen, who all sat cross-legged on the floor. "It's good to have you with us, old Dan. It's good to have you home at last. We've got a long time to catch up on the yarns and all of the news of the past." "Who are you?" muttered Daniel Mackay. "Why did you invite me in?" But no voice came to answer his question, no sound save the stir of the wind. His body was found 2 days later, and hastily they bore it away to a spot 50 yards from the shanty, and quickly they dug him a grave. Dan found his rest by the river, along with the other 3 men who had died in the ramshackle shanty of tin. Now the months they slipped by, and the shanty lay empty, abandoned again, and people had heard of the deaths there, and no one now ventured in. One day into town came a tinker, trying to sell pots and pans. "I need some help from someone who's quick with his mind and is also quite good with his hands." He hired a young lad known as Albert, who was 12, bright and good with his hands. "I'll take on your job," said young Albert, "selling your pots and your pans." Later that day they departed. Albert left all of his kin, and they rode past the ramshackle shanty of tin. But storm clouds had started to gather, and the black night was now closing in. "I think that we'll turn back and shelter in that ramshackle shanty of tin." So yelled the tinker to Albert, and Albert went weak at the knees. He had heard of the ghosts of the swaggies, and their voices afloat on the breeze. "Why don't we find shelter by the river? That shanty is haunted, you know. We could camp by the trees. I'd understand if you, sir, would rather not go." So said Albert, quite bravely, to the tinker, who laughed and replied, "I don't think I'll be beaten or set upon by a swaggy who'd rather not have died." So they spurred on the horse at a gallop, as the clouds full of thunder rolled in, and just as the rain fell they got there to the ramshackle shanty of tin. Inside it was musty and dusty, Albert's feet fixed to the floor. I think I'll sleep where I am, sir, back here where I stand by the door. The tinker just laughed and said to the lad, I'm tired, and I think I'll turn in. I'm not afraid of a ghost or a ghoul that lives in a shanty of tin. The rain it fell down with great gusto, as the tin on the shed banged and groaned. The tinker he snored and the wind blew, and Albert wished he was back home. Suddenly, at the end of the shanty, not far from the tinker asleep, Albert could make out the dark shape of something that made his heart leap. He sat up in his swag and he saw it again, this black shape with 2 yellow eyes, and Albert leapt up as he flew through the door, as the shape let out blood-curdling cries. "Ah!" yelled Albert as he flew through the air. "Ah!" yelled back the black leaping shape. "Ah!" yelled the tinker, who now clawed at the walls, trying to make his escape. Outside in the moonlight he saw it, the thing that was leaping and black. The ghost of the swaggy was hot on his heels, a terrified black feral cat. But just as he made his discovery, the tinker came bounding up too. "I saw it. It just about had me. I'd be dead if it wasn't for you." The tinker left town quite soon after, and never again left the coast. He'd had enough of the Channel country outback, and its ramshackle shanties and ghosts. And Albert, he never uttered a word of what had happened within the walls of the Ramshackle Shanty, the Ramshackle Shanty of Tin. The cat saw them leave in a hurry, and it scampered back in through the door, and it purred as it climbed back onto the lap of the swagman that sat on the floor. "I'm glad that they packed up and left us. That snoring was making a din. Thanks to the cat, we'll have no more of that in our Ramshackle Shanty of Tin." And the 4 of them sat there and nodded as they boiled up a billy of tea, and they told tales of the places they'd been to before coming home to the shanty.